Hello, Nightworms audience. I am your host today, Sadie Hartmann, co-owner of Nightworms. And with me today is Tim McGregor. Hello, Tim.
Hey, Sadie, how's it going?
Good. Tim is the author of a book that is coming out on the 22nd, November 22nd, called Taboo in Four Colors. And this book is part of the My Dark Library line, and it is the fourth book in the My Dark Library line of novellas that I curated for Cemetery Gates Media. So if you go back through the Nightworms channel, you can find the three other videos that I did with LP Hernandez for Stargazers. We did Chandler Morrison for Thigh Gap, and then Kelsia Yu's Bound Feet. And so now I'm here with Tim for Taboo in Four Colors. Yeah, and I just thought I would tell you and tell the audience too that you and Chandler are the only authors whose work I had read prior to.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Yeah. When I wrote the call, I specifically had Chandler in mind when I said, if any authors out there are looking to kind of rebrand or venture out past their kind of, what do you call it, your brand or something,
Sure.
like your style, to just consider submitting. So I was really happy that Chandler took me up on that. And then I was really excited to see your name come through the sub call
Oh,
as
thanks.
well, because Heart, Strange, and Dreadful that came out through Off Limits was probably my favorite book of the year it came out.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I've heard you talk about it before. It was really nice to hear that kind of feedback. And actually, just by coincidence, today, the book was translated into Spanish. There's a company called Dilatandro who've
Oh,
been they've been putting out Spanish editions of a lot of indie horror books, and
yeah.
uh, the Spanish version of Heart, Strange, and Dreadful, which I'm not even going to attempt the Spanish title, but that just came out for pre-order today, and it's a different edition, and there's some great graphics and stuff. So it's really nice to see an older book sort of get a new life and get a translation of all things, because translations must be hard. I can't imagine that.
Yeah, I can't imagine all the work that goes into that. I mean, I write that newsletter for Cemetery Dance Germany, and Olaf has to translate whatever I write for the newsletter into German for the German audience. But sometimes I'm thinking about all the extra fluff and words that I include when I'm really excited about talking about books, and that he has to go through and
Right.
translate all of that.
I've often wondered that about when I've been reading books translated in English, uh, like how they do that, because they'll there'll be like a joke or maybe a phrase, and you're kind of like,
Yeah.
did that translate from the is that from the Spanish, or did they just take a common English idiom and stick it in there because it meant the same
Oh,
thing? Like the whole thing
yeah.
must be an arts. It's almost like writing the book all over again. So
Yeah, and sometimes I have read translated books that something just hasn't landed correctly.
yeah,
There's just a vibe or something that you're missing or feels kind of off, but it's because you're just not part of that culture.
yeah, there could be tons of like different cultural differences that you just don't know.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, for
but,
sure.
yeah.
Um, I did wanna ask you, well, first, can you read the, synopsis for our fans just so we can kind of whet their appetite for this book?
Sure. New York City, 1972. Comic book artist Wally Carson has been illustrating the stories of a reclusive writer named Salazar without ever having met the man in person. When Salazar begins missing his deadlines, Carson is sent to find out what's happened to the company's best selling writer. Carson meets resistance from the writer's wife, but when he insists, he is shocked to find Salazar in a catatonic state. When other artists at the company want to collaborate with the elusive Salazar, Carson realizes he will have to make Salazar disappear piece by piece if necessary.
I love that. Um, this book was such a surprise to me. There was nothing like it in the entire pool of novellas that came
Right.
through. Um, and when I was about 20% into it, I felt like I already knew that I was going to choose it. Yeah, I mean, so for someone like me, I didn't I read a lot of other things before I really dove hard into horror. So I was reading like a lot of murder mysteries and a lot of like crime noir and even romance. I dabbled in like Agatha Christie style detective series type things. And so it really surprised me that you came out with this whole vibe with this comic book artist and set in the 70s. I mean, where did you come up with this idea?
I don't really know. Sometimes I remember where the idea comes from because sometimes
Mhm.
I'll often come up with just the premise of like, what if this meets that? But this one I don't know. Like, I mean, I've always loved comic books and especially comic books from that period and the history of comic books and stuff.
Okay.
So I don't remember where the idea came from. But once I knew it was basically going to be a sort of noirish romance. I didn't set out to kind of mimic or ape that hard boiled style, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it just seemed to kind of flow, and it's not that hard boiled. It's because the narrator is a bit of a naive guy or a young, inexperienced guy.
Yeah.
But it just kind of flowed out. I think maybe years of reading comic books and stuff. Uh, I don't know. It just kind of came out, and I had an absolute blast writing this. This was probably one of the funnest books I've ever written. Um,
That really comes through too, actually, because it does have such like a unique style. And I mean, I have to talk about the cover for a second.
yeah.
So just zoom on. It's kind of shiny, but there's like a woman here and she's smoking and she kind of has her hands back like this. And then it looks like Tim McGregor dead on the ground, actually.
I keep hearing that. Yeah,
That kind of looked like you too.
a little bit.
Well, I told the artist, I was like, it needs to kind of be set in an attic. I do want like a girl, but she's got to be wearing like 70s clothes. Like it has to be
Right.
appropriate. But I was thinking in my head of like kind of the damsel in distress, the femme fatale,
Oh, I see. I see.
kind of thing. Like, because I watched a lot of like Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall type of stuff. And did you too? Do you
Yeah.
have like oh yeah, what are some of your favorites?
Well, especially for this one, I've always loved The Postman Always Rings Twice
Oh, I love that movie.
and Double Indemnity, which are both, I think they're both by James Caan.
Yeah.
And again, they're like, I don't think there's a detective in either of them. They're just kind of regular folks who get mashed, who kind of meet up, and there's a desperate situation. But yeah, I used to love those 40s noir, like just the shadows and the style and the quick banter in those. Like you really have to
Yes.
strain your ear to keep on top of what they're saying. Uh,
Yes. And they can get pretty dark sometimes too.
Totally dark, completely dark. One of my
Yeah.
favorites actually is did you ever see what's Mildred Pierce with Joan Crawford?
No, I haven't seen that one.
You should see that one. That one's great.
Okay.
This woman kind of struggling with like shitty men in her life, and she owns a restaurant. And she gets to be famous, but yeah, it's a classic of the genre and really really compelling. And Joan
I
Crawford's
love, and you said it was Joan Crawford,
yeah.
right? Yeah, I love her. Like I remember watching one of her movies with my mom. I think it was that Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Oh my god, yeah.
And I was so just she's so magnetic and horrifying in that film. Like, I mean, I've never seen anything like it
That
again.
one's that one's pretty singular. Like the two of them, Crawford and Betty Davis, and the way it's shot, like, but
Yeah.
it's also this like sordid little tale of like old Hollywood glamour gone to pot. You know,
Yes.
I guess like it's a bit like Sunset Boulevard in a way too.
Yeah, and it's funny because well, I'm 46. And I always feel like the younger generation is missing out on black and white movies. Like I was lucky enough my mom kind of I wouldn't say she forced me to watch old movies, but like they were definitely on. Like we watched,
Right.
a lot of like Alfred Hitchcock movies and just old black and white movies, which kind of gave me a foundation in that style of storytelling and kind of an affinity for that. So
Sure.
your book taps on so many different things. Like I tell people all the time of the whole line, this book like just crosses off so many genres that people like because it's got the romance element, it has the noir, it has the mystery, it has humor,
Right.
it's it's light and dark at the same time. Like I'm actually just really floored by this book in particular.
That's cool. That's probably why I had so much fun writing it, because it does skip across all these genres, plus
Yeah.
playing in the world of like uh, the comic book industry, and just the buildup of like all that's like you. I was watching old black and white movies, probably because like I'm a little older than you are, but they were still playing when we were kids. Like the TV stations weren't afraid to show a black and white movie.
Yeah.
So yeah, it will be too bad if younger generations don't see black and white movies. Like I don't think my kids have seen a black and white movie, except for maybe like Frankenweenie, that
Yeah.
kid.
The ones that are stylish black and
Yeah,
white movies.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, so I was thinking about the reason for some of this lost culture. And I think, like, so when I was younger, you had to call the family phone,
right.
to like the house phone, and you
Yeah,
didn't know which person in the family was going to pick up the phone. Like, you could get mom, dad, you could get your friend, you could get their sibling. Like, you didn't know. And it's the same kind of situation with television because
mm,
back then you had like 40 channels, that's all anyone had, and you'd flip through it, and like Turner Classic Movies was like one of the channels later on that just my mom would just always have
right,
playing in the
right.
background. Like I remember watching Laura that way, where it was just on TV, and so we just watched it. But nowadays it's kind of like a picking and choosing of the menu streaming, and so it's like very particular. It's the same with like albums. Like you would buy a whole fucking album to listen to, and you would listen to the whole thing
Yeah,
versus streaming one song.
yeah. That's very true. Especially like I guess does anybody make concept albums anymore? Probably not.
Probably not.
Like you listen to the whole record and you got
Yeah.
up and you had to turn it over, and yeah, it is weird. It's funny. Just you're just mentioning the phone thing. Uh, I grew up in Northern Ontario. It was fairly remote kind of place, but we were on a party line, which meant that there was three other households using the same phone line. So if you wanted to use the phone, you had to pick it up and listen.
Yeah.
Oh, like the neighbors on it,
Yeah.
and like we ran a business on that telephone, and there was like at one point there was three teenagers in the house who were.
Yeah. How the heck?
It's really funny to think about it now because in the age of cell phones and technology, and my kids have phones. Uh, to think back to like if you want to call somebody, the line may have been busy with somebody else, and you would have had to
Yes.
wait. You know.
Yes, exactly right. And that's what that was sort of the point of the from the cell phone thing is it was like now we all have just our own individual phone. So when you call someone, you know exactly who is going to pick it up. So, I mean, I'm a little sad that like maybe a younger generation maybe hasn't been raised on some good crime noir
Yeah.
or, but there's plenty of us out there who still really fancy it. Like I'm really drawn to it. I would love to see more thriller noir crime thrillers and mashed up with the horror
Sure.
elements. Yeah. But you
Yeah.
also have a romance in here. So I feel like I mean, I'm not going to say make a statement for you,
No, go
obviously, but
ahead.
I feel like you as a writer have that horror with heart like intrinsically built into your storytelling voice because Heart Strange and Dreadful had a romance at its core as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's romance just kind of pops up. It's either I'm not a big romance reader. I've read some, but not a lot. Um, but romance or relationships always pop up. I mean, like romantic relationships pop up
Yeah.
in my stories a lot. And it's just, I don't know. They always got to come out. So whether like, I don't know if I'm good at writing a typical romance. In fact, I'm not sure if I could write something that doesn't have some weird, creepy element to it. But
Yeah.
um, you kind of can't go wrong with even if you got a pure horror story, if you still had some suggestion of a romance, I think that works really well because it immediately it gives the reader something to hope for, like, or like the reader will be reading it going, just open your eyes, that person's right there. But it
Yeah.
also raises the stakes in a way. Um, but this thing, Taboo, is weird because I think it's at its core, it's a romance because it's really
Yeah.
just these two people.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other genres just kind of mix in with it. But yeah, I like writing romantic entanglements, and I don't know, like they're not always in the nicest way, like borderline infidelity or just weird, strange relationships.
Well, I mean, that's what I like about horror nowadays. I mean, I don't know exactly what it was like in the 80s, and I followed like three major authors, when I was younger. I didn't know a lot about what was going on in the horror genre. I feel like I only kind of really know what's been going on in the last like 5, 7 years. But I've just noticed a trend of horror just kind of going through like a metamorphosis
Right.
of defining the genre where it's sort of had this stereotype of like, oh, well, it's, people stabbing each other or killing and slasher and monsters, it's just very like categorized in a certain way. But I feel like the stronger novels that are rising to the top and winning awards are more ambiguous about horror. Um,
Yeah, I'd agree.
which is really what the whole line is about for me. I just was like trying to pick stories that didn't stay in their lane.
Right. I was actually curious about that. If you had, when you set out to or started this, if you had an agenda of like, if you knew what you wanted, other than the horror novella, or if it was just, or if you were just looking for anything that appealed to you.
Yeah, when I approached Joe about this idea, I kind of just had in my mind like I've I have developed this relationship with authors over the years where they've begun to like talk to me about different projects that they're doing and different things they're trying. And I've always just been like, I wish I could just help you in this situation because
Okay.
they'd be like, oh, well, I sent it to these four publishers or this sub call or this agent, and they just got all these closed doors. And I just kind of thought to myself, like, I wish that I could help elevate some of these things that I know readers want because being a part of the Bookstagram community,
Mhm.
I feel like I'm discussing books and what we all love and what we all want like so often. And I feel like the publishers are missing that. They
Right.
think in terms of like marketability, but they're not listening to what readers really want.
Right.
So I wanted to just kind of control the narrative a little bit. And so I approached Joe with that idea. Like, can I just do an open call and pick 6 stories that I feel represent the genre really well? And he was all about it. Like he thought it was great. So
That's
that's
cool because I have to say, I mean, like I've read the first three,
yeah,
and all excellent books. The newest one, I loved Kelsey's ghost story with a weird
yeah,
twist and two very relatable characters. And
yeah,
Chandler's story was so out there in terms of character, but his narrative style and his dialogue was great. And
yeah,
LP's story was like kind of mind blowing. I really like the diversity of the stories that were there, and I think it's cool that you kind of wanted to jump in because you weren't seeing what you wanted to see, or you knew it could be bigger and broader or different than what is typically
yeah.
written for. So
Yeah, and I love a strong emphasis on character and relationships. So with LP's story being really focused on like the father-son relationship
right,
and Kelsey as being about these two best friends and exploring themes of grief. And then Chandler just had this like very, very serious topic to talk about, but he did it in such a way that I felt was like satirical, but also just like
yeah,
it just Chandler just has like his own Chandler thing going on, but I felt like he had been so like misrepresented in the genre for not misrepresented. I don't want to say that. He wrote Dead Inside when he was extremely young, and that's the book that people just keep
right,
bringing up for him as an author. I wanted to see, people experience his stuff like outside of that. And then the next two in the series are also super different. Like you have a gothic story coming up next. And then you have R.A. Busby's is like a total like sci-fi medical body horror.
Wow.
It's disgusting.
That's cool.
It's totally disgusting. So yeah, it's gonna be fun when the whole line is finished.
For sure. I can't wait to read Bonnie Swan's and what's R.A. Busby's novel called?
It's called oh crap, now it just like blew right out of my head. Corporate Body.
Right. Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Those sound awesome.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be great. I think we should do like an end of the line party.
That would be fun.
Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, it'd be a blast.
I did want to talk to you really quickly about this title page. So the title pages have kind of taken on a life of their own and have become this like really cool separate entity. But the title page here, again, I don't know, my camera's not going to be great, but
This is it.
Ryan did this amazing comic book style in there for the title page, and each book has like their own reflection of style, and I think it's just part of like the whole collection. And what were your immediate thoughts when you saw the title page?
I absolutely loved it because sorry, what was the artist's name? Kyle?
Oh, his name's Ryan.
Right. Ryan immediately captured such a strong comic book vibe, plus the sort of noir aspects of it. I absolutely loved it. I actually used to, when I was younger, before I started writing prose and stuff like that, I used to make my own comic books.
Oh,
and
cool.
they're very much in this same style with the old school sort of comic book flavor, and then telling weird stories. So I was over the moon when I saw this. It had all the right vibes, and there's something cool, like seeing a full scale illustration included in a book. Like you don't always see that.
Yeah.
I really love that about this. It kind of gives it an extra bit of, I don't know, tingly feel to it. Like this is going to be good,
Yeah, I like that too. I always think that a little illustration or a map or something at the beginning is just a little extra special touch.
Yeah, I love seeing maps, even if it's not even warranted, because sometimes it's not. You don't really need to know where everything is.
Yeah.
It's so cool seeing maps. Like, yeah, this is going to be cool.
Yeah, Andy Davidson's book, The Hollow Kind, has a map right in the beginning and the end pages. And it's just so cool. It's just like you spend a little extra time looking at it. And then when you hear that particular location later in the book, I always go back and flip to the front and look at it again. It's really cool. I love that. I feel like horror and comic books are sort of trending together right now. I was in the mall shopping for my daughter for some graphic novels, and I went into a comic book store, and I want to say like a good portion, maybe even half of the comics were all horror.
Really? Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. I think they're just kind of trending together. Like there's something about, well, and Stephen Graham Jones has a comic book going, like Christopher Golden and Tim Levin have a comic book. Brian Keene does comics.
Yeah, it could be. Honestly, I've kind of fallen off of reading comics in a while, so I don't really know. But I know that's like someone like Junjo Ito has become just huge.
Yeah, I just started reading him for the first time.
With good reason. Yeah, I've never seen, like, his stories are amazing. They're gross or weird and stuff.
So gross. And like I read the collection Shiver, which and it's totally horror. It's just completely horror. But yes, the illustrations just get in your brain like a earworm, you just see that. But do you have any, like, if somebody approached you to do comic books or anything, would you be interested in something like that?
I would. It would be fun to do. It'd probably take some learning just to learn how to write, and that's
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, you kidding? It would be a total blast. And comic books and horror have always been kind of synonymous with each other. I mentioned it comes up briefly in Taboo, but in the 50s, horror comic books took off and they
Yeah.
were selling just crazy. But then some quack psychologist came out with a book blaming horror comics for juvenile delinquency, and then
Oh,
it became a moral panic, and they actually had a Senate subcommittee where they hauled up all of these comic book publishers and writers. And then after that, the industry got scared. It's like, okay, no more horror, no more weird covers and stuff. But eventually, it kind of came back, which happens in the story. But
yeah.
horror
Isn't
comics
that
have always
funny?
been, yeah,
I mean, it's just like somebody, they need something to blame for whatever is going on in the time, whether it's rock music or metal music or video games, or I
for
feel
sure.
like
And
anything kids like.
there's also there's usually somebody who's kind of trying to game it, like they make it their cause, and then they get some kind of political clout by beating this straw man. Again, whether it's bad lyrics and
Yeah,
or comics or whatever. But yeah, same story every time. But
every time. Yeah, it's kind of that satanic panic type of thing where it's just like, let's blame anything else but like our own home life
yeah,
for what's going on.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Tim, before we wrap things up, I did want to ask you about some upcoming things that you have going on. So you just released Lure through Tenebrious Press,
Yeah.
correct? And then what else do you have going on?
Uh, in February, Wasps in the Ice Cream comes out with Raw Dog Screaming Press, which I'm really excited about.
Nice.
It
Yeah,
was supposed to come out, and then the publisher shut down. It was a big brouhaha, and now it's a
right.
funny story to tell. Um, but out of that, I managed to find another publisher, thanks to Becky Spratford, because she made the introductions.
Wonderful. And I
Yeah,
love Wasps in the Ice Cream, by the way. For anybody who's watching, you got to pick it up. It's coming of age, horror with heart, all that.
yeah, it's kind of more of my brand. Again, another kind of romance, really. But yeah, that's. I'm so happy it's found a home. I just found a home with Jennifer and Raw Dog Screaming Pest. So that's February, and as for the rest, I'm just writing new stuff and sending it out, and the usual brouhaha.
Do you do short stories, Tim? Like, do you do
Not
anthology?
very often.
Oh,
I'm not very good at short stories. I really struggle to write good ones. I've gotten lucky a few times, and I've had
mhm.
like I had a story come out with in Found, an anthology of found footage horror that was edited by
Oh,
Andy,
yeah.
Andy Call and Gabino Iglesias. So
Yeah.
again, that was one of the lucky ones that kind of worked, and I'm so grateful I got into that amazing anthology. But I really struggle. I don't know. Short stories are kind of an art in themselves. They take
Oh,
some kind
yeah.
of crystalline idea,
Yep.
and I really struggle to find that crystalline idea or just stick with it because they end up just running long. So yeah, it's a skill I'm not great at. I'm better at novella and novel length, so I tend to not write as much short fiction as I probably
Well,
should.
I mean, as a seasoned writer, like, I think it's great that you've found what you're good at and you
Right.
do that. I mean, there's no sense in like spinning your wheels on something, because an industry makes you feel like you have to. I think like that's the trick of social media as well, is like people see what everybody else is doing, or like, oh, I'm in this anthology, or I've just been published in this magazine and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And there's probably a tendency to be like, is that where am I shaping my career to look like this, or am I making it my own?
Yeah, I guess so. But there's also the time when I'll see a submission call and it's got a really cool theme. I'm like, oh, I want to write something for that.
Yeah.
And when I do, it often kind of just goes, "Mwah," or it's like running really long. I'm like, this is supposed to be a short story. It's
Yeah.
20 words already. So
Well,
and
those could always turn into novels though. Like,
yeah,
so
yeah, true.
yeah.
True. In fact, I had this what I'm just finishing up right now started off as a short story that didn't sell. But now it's this sort of Bride of Frankenstein story that I'm kind of jazzed about. So yeah, never say never, and maybe it'll grow into something else. But
And Tim, do you have any like writing advice for people who are maybe watching this video thinking that they would like to get into indie publishing or just any kind of like little nugget of wisdom?
Nothing too profound, but every years ago, I would listen to a couple of different podcasts about writing and publishing and stuff like that because I was self-publishing for a long time,
Yeah.
and there was this one podcaster slash author named Joanna Penn who was talking about comparisonitis, which was just the act of comparing yourself to somebody else,
Right.
especially
Yeah.
in publishing, especially when you see somebody announcing a story acceptance or a book deal. And just kind of that helped me a lot at the time because sometimes you just can't help it. Sometimes it's going to pop up, but having a little name for it, so that when I felt that little twinge of jealousy or
Yeah.
fear that I'm being left behind and the world's forgotten me, it doesn't go away, but I can manage it. Go, okay, that's just comparisonitis. It'll last 5 minutes or 5 hours, but it's not going to last. Just
Yeah.
don't panic and don't spiral. Especially in this age of social media, it's so easy to kind of let yourself spiral in comparison with others or feel like you need to be doing something. That's the only advice I got. Like, don't panic, go at your own pace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that authors are really demystifying the process for people these days. That's one good thing I think about social media. Like when you were talking, I was thinking about Gemma Amore is on TikTok, and she's doing a series right now talking about imposter syndrome.
Okay.
And she's just being super vulnerable and just being like, here's these feelings that come up, and here are kind of some ways that you can work through these feelings as they come up. And it's just been really helpful. I mean, I think all of us kind of have these like moments of self-doubt, especially when we see what everybody else is doing. But social media really is just the highlight reel, I mean, unless people are openly being transparent and vulnerable, it's usually just the hit parade, It's not really the highs and lows.
That's true. That's amazing that Gemma's doing that. It doesn't surprise me. I'm not on TikTok, but I've see on Twitter all the time. And she's always been very open about the whole process, which is great. Which is especially right now the discussion of whether or not Twitter is going to collapse or where we're all going to go. But I've learned so much from other writers just talking about personal stuff or talking about publishing or achievements or setbacks. There is no mystery to this. It's if you want to do it, you just put your head down and do it. But there are things to learn along the way, and there are bumps, or sometimes there's bad actors. I don't know. The more transparent, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all just learning from each other, which is like really cool because I'm going through it right now too, but I feel like all of you guys and watching you guys over the last 3 or 5 years, I can just kind of model I know what to expect basically. Like I know that when I get my edits back, there's going to be this process because you guys are all talking about like, oh, the red line edits and those kinds of things. So I feel like I kind of have like expectations.
Right. Which is, I mean, the better informed you are, then the better you'll be to manage it, right? But
yeah, absolutely. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me tonight. And I just want to celebrate this book. Taboo in Four Colors is having its birthday tomorrow, November 22nd. So this book will be available for purchase, and everybody who pre-ordered it will be getting it very, very shortly if they haven't already. I know sometimes Joe sends it out early. So book 4 in the line with only 2 left. It's very exciting.
That's cool. Thank you very much for having me on. I just want to give a quick shout out to Christina Osborne, who did the cover.
For sure. TruBorn Design. Yes.
That's it. I keep forgetting her company name. TruBorn Design. Because she captured it so well. And I know that your input was in there a lot, but just that, the cover rocks, and I'm so happy with it. So.
Yeah, and also Ryan's last name escaped me earlier in the video, but it's Ryan Mills. So if anybody's interested in hitting him up for some illustration work. He's literally one of the best. He's done some really great illustrations for Ross Jeffrey lately on his books Tome and Juniper. So Ryan Mills, I'll drop it in our video description too. So
Good idea.
Yeah, well, thank you again for joining me, and I hope that you have a good rest of your night.
You too. It's great talking to you. I'll talk to you later.
Okay, I'll have you stay just for a second.